today's lesson is going to be on the domain and range of piecewise functions. Now, in the last two lessons, we went over what is a relation, what is a function, how to determine their domain and range. Now we're going to be having piecewise functions, and we are going to determine their domain and range. So what is a piecewise function? A piecewise function is a function made up of pieces of other functions, each with its own subdomain. They are grouped together with the brace symbol. So the first function we're going to look at is going to be f of x, and here's the brace. This is what groups the two functions together. It's going to be x squared is, mistake right there, x squared if x is less than 0. And then the other part is going to be negative x if x is greater than or equal to 0. So these are the two pieces of the function. So let's take a look at this function. Here is the graph of this function. Notice on the left we have x squared, and on the right we have negative x. So how can we determine the domain and range of this function? Well, let's read it from left to right to look at the domain. If we read it going on the left, the function continues to go to the left even though it's off the graph. It'll continue off the graph towards the left. Now let's read it to the right. If we look at the right of the function, it continues to go to the right and including off the graph without bound. So it goes all the way to the left and it goes all the way to the right. So the domain is going to be negative infinity to infinity, or all real numbers. So let's write that in interval notation. The domain is parentheses, negative infinity to infinity. And the range is brace x such that x is all real numbers. So now let's take a look at the range. So here's the function once again. And now we need to read it from bottom to top. If we read it going towards the bottom, you can see that the graph continues to go to the bottom without bound. Now let's read it as it goes up. So as it goes up, it continues to go up without bound as well. So the range is also negative infinity to infinity, which means that the range in set notation is y such that y is all real numbers. So let's take a look at graph number 2. Graph number 2 is f of x equals x if x is between negative 4 and negative 1, not including negative 4 and not including negative 1. And then the second piece is f of x equals 2x minus 2 if x is between 1 and 3, including 1 and 3. So now let's take a look at the domain of this. If we read it from left to right, notice that the first piece has values between negative 4 and negative 1. Now, if we look at the second piece, it has x values between 1 and 3. So the domain of this has a break in between. So the domain is going to be, since there is an open circle at negative 4, we're going to say open parentheses negative 4 because it's open there. Comma, we go until we get to negative 1 and it's open, so we use a parentheses. Then there's a break, so we say union. And then the next x value is at 1 and it's included, so we're going to say bracket 1, comma 3, bracket. And that's our domain. Now in set notation, the domain is going to be brace x such that negative 4 is less than x is less than negative 1, comma 1 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 3. Close brace. So now let's take a look at the range. For the range, we're going to have to read it from bottom to top. If we look at the first piece, at the very bottom, it crosses the y value of -4. And then it goes up until the y value of -1. Then there's a break, and it has a y value of 0 in the second piece and a y value of 4 at the top of the second piece. So now let's determine what the range is. So the range, since we're starting at the bottom and it's an open circle at the bottom, is going to be parentheses, -4, 1, close parentheses, union. Now the second piece is starting at 0 and including 0, so it's going to be bracket 0, 4, bracket. And there's my range. My range in set notation is going to be brace y such that -4 is less than y is less than 1, 0 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 4. So let's look at the last example here. Now I didn't put what this function equals to, but that's okay. We have the graph, and we can read the domain and range based off the graph. So, to find the domain, we read all the way to the left. At the left, there is a closed dot, and we can see that that x value is -8. Then if we go to the right, there appears to be a break at -5. However, there's an open circle in the first piece, but a closed circle in the second piece, and they're both at -5. So -5 is still included as part of the domain. It will continue from -8 past -5 on to the end of the second piece at -2. Then there's a break, and then notice it starts at 0 and continues until the open circle at the end of the third piece. Now, the open circle at the end of the third piece ends at a number called 2 pi. That number is approximately 6.28. So that's where it ends. And it's an open circle, so it's not reaching that value. So the domain for this is going to be bracket -8, comma, and we're going to go past -5 all the way to -2. Close bracket. Then there's a break, so we put a union. And then we're starting at 0, so we're going to put bracket 0, comma, until we get to the end, which is 2 pi. And since it's open at 2 pi, we close with the parentheses. And then the set notation for this is brace x such that -8 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to -2, comma 0 is less than or equal to x is less than 2 pi. Notice I used less than at 2 pi, not less than or equal to, because 2 pi is not included. So now what is the range of this function? So let's read it from bottom to top. If we look at the very bottom value, the very bottom value is at -6. And then the top of the first piece goes to -4. Then there's a break. And then the bottom of the second piece is at -1. The top of the second piece is at +1. Now on the third piece, the bottom of the third piece is at +2. And the top of the third piece is at +5. So there's 3 pieces to the range. So the range is going to be bracket -6, comma -4, close parentheses, union, bracket -1, comma 1, bracket, union, bracket 2, comma 5, bracket. And that's because it's closed at -6, it's open at -4, it's closed at both -1 and 1, and closed at 2 and 5. So now in set notation, this would be brace y such that -6 is less than or equal to y is less than -4, comma, -1 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 1, comma, 2 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 5. Close brace. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's lesson on domain and range of piecewise functions. I hope this gives you a good introduction to how to read from left to right on the domain and how to read from bottom to top on the range. If you have any questions, feel free to message your teacher.